we'll now move on to our next short talk, and this is by Mishal Thadani, who is the founder of Rhizome. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I believe Mishal is joining us from my neck of the woods, the Washington area, and he's going to talk about AI for a climate resilient future. So, Mishal, if you're on, please join us. Yeah, thank you. I see you there. Thanks, Mishal.
You're muted, Mishal.
You're muted. Sorry, we can't hear you. You're muted. We can see you, but we can't.
Sorry about that. It's as if this is the first time that I've come off mute. So thank you so much for the opportunity, first of all. And I just got to say that the last presentation was extremely inspirational. I was playing my Game Boy at 16 years old while he's designing DAC systems that are net zero. So very cool to see. So for my presentation here, I wanted to focus on my story in energy and climate. I've been in this space for about 15 years, doing a variety of things. And I would like to, sort of walk through the journey to get to where I am today, which is effectively a co-founder and CEO of Rhizome, where we build climate resilience application and tools for enterprises to help them identify climate-related risks and then mitigate those risks for themselves and communities. So what I'd like to start with is I've been interested in energy and climate since I was in high school, and then coming out of college, just as in Houston, Texas, at Rice University, in the middle of oil and gas capital of the world, I was really excited to get my first job in clean energy at a utility scale wind energy developer. And this was an amazing experience, climbing wind turbines, siting them, permitting them, and then ultimately seeing them through to construction. Interestingly enough, I was doing it for none other than BP. So while it was interesting to say that I worked for BP, when at the end of the day, we're trying to represent an energy shift. At the end of the day, it really represented the ability to work on very high technology energy transformation projects that were starting to get deployed across the United States. Wind was a little bit slow for me. It takes normally 3 to 5 years to develop those utility scale projects. And I wanted something a little bit faster paced. I like moving relatively quickly. So I jumped into the residential, commercial, and community solar space. I joined a really fast growing startup that was scaling across the country, working with local communities, with customers on developing residential, commercial, and then eventually community solar projects. The local aspect of it really appealed to me, working with everyday individuals on identifying what their home electrification and home net zero goals are, and working with businesses to identify, based on their energy load, how can you both reduce their energy burden as well as increase their or lower their carbon footprint. And while that was happening, I moved to Washington, D.C., where, as one might imagine, I got very active politically in the local community. I started testifying at the local DC council related to energy and environmental bills. I helped work with DC council members on passing legislation related to community solar, giving renters the ability to participate in the solar economy. I worked on a bill related to the deployment of distributed energy resources, and then worked with the regulator on grid modernization proceedings as well. And this was all in my spare time. When we ended up getting rules passed related to community solar, I knew that I could do something a little bit extra to help that market grow. So I launched my first company, which was a community solar company called District Solar, to help grow and develop and deploy community solar projects in DC and Maryland. And ultimately, it was exciting. We got some projects built. It was very much a learning experience, but we didn't really have many resources. We didn't see scale in the market because the market was growing too slowly. These are infrastructure projects. At the end of the day, you have to interconnect with the local utility, which is a slow process. And ultimately, we ended up winding down that business. What I ended up finding and ended up resonating with me the most in my journey in doing that for several years was that I recognized I had one particular skill set that was pretty effective. And that was bringing concepts of new technologies and business models to policymakers and regulators to help transform an industry that's heavily regulated, the electric utility industry, into one that it can actually be a tool for enabling decarbonization and increasing the reliability and resilience of everyone that's connected to the system. And that's where I started getting very interested in the AI space. I was leading the team at Urbint, an AI technology company. There are massive amounts of use cases for AI to be able to automate the deployment of distributed energy resources, to really optimize power grid flow, to make sure that the peaks when emissions are the highest are the less times that we're actually using that energy, and really help scale those efficiencies and those resources at the same time. So I was really excited about AI and Urbint's capability to work with utilities to deploy those tools. And just to give you a sense of what we were working on as one of our use cases, this is a gas pipeline that was decommissioned in the city of Chicago 5 years ago in 2019. And this pipe was installed when Abraham Lincoln was president, or almost 200 years ago. So this pipe was just decommissioned after 200 years, and you can see the degradation on it. Now, there are many pipelines across the country that develop this type of decay over time. And we were training artificial intelligence models to really identify which pipelines those must be, and then proactively go and replace those pipelines, of course, for environmental and safety concerns, methane mitigation, as well as preventing injuries and deaths from potential explosions. And the more that we were working on these types of use cases, the more I got interested in how AI could actually be used to mitigate the impacts on the electric system from extreme weather events. And so this kind of harkened back to 2021 in Winter Storm Uri. When that hit in Texas, the entire power grid went down for more than 3 days. Many people died, almost 200 people died. And of course, there were many disruptions in supply chains, businesses, major economic losses. I'm from Texas. I was born and raised there. As I mentioned, I went to Rice and I spent some time in Houston. And so this one hit pretty close to home. I wanted to explore exactly how these same types of AI modeling approaches could be used to really help enhance how we operate and plan the system of the future to be more resilient to extreme weather. And in reflection, there are lots of different extreme weather events that are having an impact with electric utilities today. If you look at this component right here, it's called the C-hook. Now, this C-hook, as you can tell, is extremely rusted and snapped in 2020 and owned and operated by Pacific Gas and Electric out in the Bay Area. And it caused one of the most devastating wildfires in California, killing over 80 people in California. And I believe the cost of the wildfire was about 500 billion, around 464 billion, all because this C-hook snapped. It was holding a cable to a transmission tower. That cable was then went haywire, made contact with some vegetation, and then sparked a wildfire. And when you zoom out and you think about all of the risks and hazards that electric utilities might be facing, what we end up coming down to is that this is a $500 billion problem. And that is the gap in terms of the amount that needs to be invested in the electric utility sector to mitigate the increasing risks from increasing frequency and severity of all types of climate hazards that are causing more and more disruptions, outages, loss of life, so on and so forth. So we need to invest $500 billion into the system to only mitigate the increases at its current levels. Obviously, this gap is growing quite widely. And I took this thesis and I started writing about it. I was talking to utilities, regulators on what exactly is required in the electric utility industry to enable the planning of a more resilient system. And I ended up leaving my former company and doing a lot of investigation on my own. And you can see the early stages of a startup here where, again, very little money, just showing up at meetings, trying to gather as much information as we could from utilities, their practices, the data that they have, their technology systems, so on and so forth, doing the product discovery and customer discovery work in order to get to what we have developed today. And that's what we refer to as Rhizome's platform. We've designed a petabyte scale system to ingest utility system data from our customers. And we have already architected weather and climate information. So that's where a lot of the cloud scale resources come into play. We layer on vegetation, and then we layer on information related to socioeconomic losses from those power outages. And when we layer on these pieces of information, we end up creating models that are able to learn from historic extreme weather events, where are the vulnerabilities on the grid given certain grid asset characteristics, like a rusted C-hook, for instance, train models to understand the probability of failure given the presence of different extreme weather circumstances, and then using climate data, forecast those risks into the future. We've developed a full application to support the asset planners and engineers at utilities to assess vulnerabilities on the grid quickly through that geospatial format, optimize different investments, and then ultimately justify those investments to their regulators so that it can actually close that resilience investment gap. Where we are today is, or rather where we were as of October, we raised $2.5 million in our first venture round in order to scale this technology across the electric utility sector in the US and Canada. And it's a really exciting time for us. We're continuing to work with more and more utilities. But what I'd like to leave everyone with is kind of an offer here on ways to get involved in climate if you'd like to become more involved, either professionally or not. And here are my recommendations in subsequent order. Number one, when you're exploring working in this space or just trying to get better about the issues, make sure to do your own research and analysis, just like that previous presentation, which was excellent. Number two is get involved locally. You won't learn as much as when you actually go and advocate for something and then meet the people that are doing that similar types of advocacy. And that leads to number three, is to meet kindred spirits who are, generally speaking, aligned with your worldview or even have some differences, but generally speaking, just want to see a better place in the issue set that you've identified. If you do those three things, then I think we'll get a lot of people that are making a huge effort in climate, and we'd be really excited to see that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mishal. This was really, really excellent. So nice to know that there's someone as passionate as you working in my neighborhood, especially. This is a very narrow, selfish perspective, I guess, but it resonates because you touched upon two themes that are so important to in diaspora: AI and climate. And there are two things that we are holding events on. In fact, we have an AI for Social Good Summit coming up in the Bay Area in California on the 26th of April. And, it's great to know that you've kind of married those two issues in what you've just spoken about here with us today. So thank you.